Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, Coach.
G'day everybody, Coach M here. Welcome to the Coaching Podcast. Today I have my absolute pleasure to interview someone with also a foreign accent for our American listeners, Pete Steinberg. He's a leadership and innovation keynote speaker and coach, president of Innovation Thought, supporting leaders and organizations through transformations, best-selling author of The Leadership Shock. And he's been working with Fortune 200 and 500 organizations for more than 25 years. The one thing I love as well about having you on the show, Pete, is you've got the sporting background, leading the US women's rugby to 2 World Cups and also being an Olympic coach at Rio there, as well as the leadership. This is what this podcast is all about. So our pattern break question to kick it off is, so welcome to the show. And if rugby was a shape, what shape would it be?
So, Coach M, happy to be here, excited to have the discussion. I would say it's whatever shape you want it to be. And the reason why I say that is what we say in rugby is because of the game that it is that it's actually open to every kind of shape. Like it's actually part of the attraction of the game. It's very inclusive. So I always like to say that the best woman I ever coached was 5'4" and 200 pounds. She's currently playing at the World Cup in England. She's a professional. She's been in the team of the year, world team of the year. Her name's Hope Rogers. And the best player I ever played with was a guy, and he was 5'7" and 150 pounds. And so you can be tall, you can be short, you can be squat, you can be thin. Like rugby is for all shapes and sizes. That's like the perfect question to kick this off for rugby, Em. Just want to say, you had the perfect question. So.
Well, thank you for that. I take pride in my pattern break questions. And let's just take that into the leadership world immediately. In the workplace, within the team, if you're all thinking the same and you're all acting the same, there's no innovation. And I know that innovation is one of your superpowers. You have this ability, because this isn't the first time we've chatted. I'm so excited for this conversation because one of the things you said you love to do is go into organizations, chat with the C-suite and really get into the challenges that they are facing so that you can put something together to maximize the potential of their people. How do you do it?
Well, I think, first of all, that's great. So first of all, diversity, completely true. It's actually in social science, what they try to do is make effects go away. So you might have heard of the power pose, like it was a big thing a while ago. The power pose doesn't actually exist. Like it's like one of those things that when the paper came out, other people tried to replicate it. They couldn't replicate it. So that's where you know it's probably not true all the time. But diversity and innovation is one of those places where actually people have tried to make it go away and they can't. So diverse signals, diverse information is actually critical to innovation. We often encourage our clients to look outside their organization, outside of their industry, and look for other places to be inspired. But I love the way you put what we do, which is like, we solve our clients' most complex people problems, and that normally means coming up with something that hasn't existed before. Right. And so we create very unique solutions. And I think I would say that the trick to the way we do it is we spend a lot more time on identifying what the problem or opportunity is than most people normally do. So when we come and work with clients, they'll often say, we have this problem. Like what they'll say, our performance management system isn't working. We need to train our managers on feedback. So they've made an assumption that the reason their performance management system isn't working is because their managers don't give feedback and they don't have the skills to give feedback. And when you say, well, that's an interesting assumption, how do you know that to be the case? How do you know that's the problem? And they don't, they just assumed that was the issue. We often find that it's not the skill issue, right? It's the mindset. So it's the way people feel and the way managers think about feedback which is criticism. It's something that's bad to do. It's difficult. Those are all mindset issues, not skill issues. And when you go in and you actually investigate it, we spend a lot of time in what we call discovery. You actually come out and often you find like it could be a systems problem. Like actually their performance management system doesn't really work and people don't really use it. It could be a mindset issue where people don't think about feedback in the right way. But I don't think we've ever come across where it's actually a skill issue, right? Like I can give you feedback if we create a culture where you're open to it, right? And I understand that giving you feedback is a gift. It's a gift of kindness. Being honest with you is a gift of kindness. If I get all of those things right, I can give you feedback. Like it's just, it's like, so to me, we spend more time than our clients are often comfortable with. Like we have to persuade them to really understand what the problem or opportunity is. And then that opens up a whole different array of potential solutions, right? Where they come to you with like, we already know what the solution is. We need feedback training. And when you actually go and you say, well, actually, that might be part of it, but what else could we do? What else do we need to do to actually solve the problem that you actually have? So that's probably going to like that. That's the way we think about it.
Thank you for sharing. And the other thing I'll just add to that, what's coming up for me is just the simplicity of some tools can help shift the mindset as well on feedback.
Completely.
Just having a communication framework can help to shift the mindset. So let's talk about champion mindset. Let's talk about elite mindset. What can the business world learn from your experience as an Olympic coach when you're dealing day in, day out with the best of the best?
It's interesting. So, often I get asked like, how do you become an Olympian? And I share the story about how you become an Olympian in rugby. So in rugby, we have a full-time professional squad of players that train in Chula Vista in California at the Elite Athlete Training Center. And so what happens in rugby is, there's a scouting system and someone's been identified in Montana, like this woman, really good, like really athletic, lots of potential, whatever the profile the coach is looking for. You bring a whole bunch of these women down to the Elite Athlete Training Center to train with your full-time professional players. Now, what will be true is that the women that you bring in are not as good as the full-time professional players because they are not full-time professional athletes, right? So they won't be fit enough, their skills won't be good enough. So what you do not look for is you do not look for the best player. What you look for is for the best learner, because you're looking for the player that can improve the most. And so through that week, what you're looking at is what are their behaviors? Do they set goals for the day, right? Are they asking for feedback, right? Are they asking for feedback from the coaches, from the other players? Often, like I look for journaling. Do people at the end of practice sit down and write down what they've learned? I'm looking for whoever is the best learner. And then those athletes go away again. And then they come back 3 months later. And the question is, did they take what they learned and did they apply it? Have they come back different? Because actually, as you know, Coach M, even as in the professional environment, most of their life is not in the controlled piece. It's when they're gone. So the question is, when they're gone, are they still eating well, right? Are they still looking after their bodies? Are they still like watching game tape? Are they doing those behaviors that make them great learners and great growers? And that's the question. So when they come back, you're like, oh, are they the same player they were last time or have they improved? And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for people that are learners. And people, I got asked on a podcast once, they were like, what made you a great coach? And I look back and I said, I wasn't a great coach. Because now I look back now and I'm like, man, there's so many things I would do differently. I would be such a better coach now. And I hope I can say that as a leadership coach, as a consultant, like the thing that makes athletes elite is the journey to excellence, which is tomorrow I want to be better than I am today. And that commitment to being better, like leveraging my experiences today to be better tomorrow.
So how do you get a difficult player or someone in the workplace who they're just not buying in? How do you turn that around?
You ask the tough questions. Coach M. These are the tough. This is so. First of all, as a coach, I love like as a rugby coach as well as an executive coach. I love the difficult players. The easy players don't need me, right? I'm in this business, in both businesses, because I want to have an impact on people's lives. If I can turn around a difficult player, I can change their life, right? I can actually make their life better. And that's the same way as an executive coach. I love the difficult clients, right? Because I'm like, I can change this person's life. And it's a real privilege to have that opportunity. To me, it's all about alignment to goals. So it's all like, what do you want to do in your career? You want to be the CEO? Right. Well, if you want to be the CEO, do you think could you be the CEO now? They'll be like, no, all right. So what do you think needs to change? So to me, there's two pieces of it. There's one is connecting it to their career, whether it's the athletic career, like you want to go to the Olympics, you want to go to the World Cup. It's actually really easy for like in sport because those career goals are so clear and the coach has so much power. Like you want to go to the World Cup, I get to choose that. Therefore, you need to do the things that I want you to do, right? So connecting it to the goals. But in rugby in particular, because it's such a player-centered sport, like when I coached at the Women's World Cup in 2017 and the women were in the semi-final, first time for 20 years we made the semis, I was up in the stands in the coaching box. You are not allowed to be on the sideline. So the players have to own a lot of stuff that like normally the coach would own. Very similar in tennis, right? You're not allowed to be coached in tennis, right? So yeah, kind of. But the idea is that, so one is connect their career goals. The second thing is get them to own their development, right? And so if whether you're as a coach or whether like a sports coach or whether an executive coach, I want them to come up with their plan that I hold them accountable to. If I come up with the plan that I give to them and they're difficult, they're not going to do it. But I can tell them, hey, you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it. And so both that career connection and then getting them to own whatever the development plan is, which is a lot through questioning and challenging and those sorts of things, but them saying, I am going to run my team meetings differently, or I am going to interact with my boss differently, and this is what it's going to look like. If they can come up with that, then I'm just holding them accountable to something they want to do because it corrects their career goals and something they've said that they're going to do. And that's, I think, how you handle the most like the difficult players and the difficult clients. How do you do it, Coach M? How do you handle the difficult players?
Thank you for asking. And in chapter 1 of my career, I definitely failed many, many times. So if you're listening,
oh yes, we all did. We all did. Right.
Yeah. In chapter 2, this is how I approach it. The better I understand who you are, how you learn, what motivates you, the more deeply curious I can be about the difficult player or the difficult leader or manager, the naysayers, then how do I as a coach keep my authentic style but adapt my communication? When do I say what? What hat do I need to wear in what moment? Sometimes do they need a spray? Right? So that's,
right.
I guess, the sporting element coming into my coaching as I really think about how I coach. And it is more and more not about me.
Yeah.
Which leads beautifully into leadership shock. The authentic leadership model that you talk about. Tell me, can you think of a moment in either sport or business where you witnessed a leadership shock? Obviously, that's the title of his book, by the way, everybody. So it was a nice segue into there. But can you think of a time where, boom, and can you tie that into sort of building on what I just said around the authentic leadership model?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a great tie. So leadership shock is actually, it was coined by a professor at the University of Colorado when I was talking to him when I was first thinking about the book. I was working with the CEO of a global consulting firm. And well, before I worked with him, I was running a session for his leadership team, a workshop. And his chief of staff came up to me afterwards and said, hey, the CEO's calendar is booked for 6 months. And I was like, so he's busy. And she said, no, literally, There was no time on his calendar for 6 months. And she said, have you seen that before? And I said, yeah. And she said, do you think you could chat to him about it? And I'm like, sure, I think I know what's going on. And this was like really the first really senior executive that I took through the authentic leadership model. It was like 12 or 14 years ago now. And so leadership shock and the term came out from this CU professor, where leaders are having meetings, right? They're delegating, they're setting visions, kind of, but nothing's really moving because they are in shock. Like, it's a little bit when you're human, when you're in shock and you can breathe, your blood pumps, but you can't do anything. And I kept coming across leaders in this space where they like, I've been in this role for 6 months, I haven't been able to do anything. Like, I feel like I have no control over what I'm doing in my role. And what I realized, it was often related to a transition when someone came into a new role, or a change in context. Like, same role, but my boss had changed, or we'd reorganized. And what it was that my old leadership model that worked when I was the president of a practice, or the chairman of a practice, as this CEO of the consulting firm was, he was the head of a practice. That model of being the head of the practice, he was applying it as the CEO, and it doesn't work, right? So an example is, I have an open door policy. Any partner that wants to meet with me will meet with me. Well, that works when you've got a small group of partners as the head of the practice. But when you're the CEO, that model can't work anymore. You have to, so that's the challenge. So people coming to these new roles, they have an implicit leadership approach that they've built up over years, right? It's not explicit. They've just done it and they've been successful. And now that model isn't working. And so the reason we talk about it being the authentic leadership model is you have to go all the way back to like some of your core things about you, what your purpose is, what your leadership beliefs are, right? What's the strengths that you bring to these roles, these things that are just you, right? And then you have to put them in the context. And these are all parts of the model, of your vision, like things that you want to do, your role expectation in the organization, what do people expect of you? You need to put all of those things together, and you need to look at them and say, well, look at all of these pieces, the things that are part of me, the things that are part of the role, the things that I want to do, and say, how should I actually be leading? What's my explicit leadership model, right? And so the CEO, as an example, had 18 direct reports. That was another reason why his the calendar was filled. But after I worked with him, he said, what are the things that you really want to do? Like, what's your role? And he said, I want to be in the market with the clients. Like, I wanted to manage the board, and I want to be with partners. Like, great. Why does your general counsel report to you? Why did your chief marketing officer report to you? Why did your head of HR report? Like, none of those are your 3 priorities. And so he said, all right, I'm going to elevate a CRO role, and they're all going to report to them. I'm like, great. Now you have time in the calendar to do the 3 things that you think you need to do, right? And so I think there's this, like, the core thing about the authentic leadership model is it makes your implicit leadership approach explicit, and therefore you can be intentional about how you lead. And that's probably another thing I think elite performers do, is they have an intentionality. Like, they know what they're doing now and why they're doing it. And I think the natural performers don't have that. Natural performers just do it because, like, it's an instinct, it's intuition, right? And that gets you so far, but it won't actually get you to the elite performance until you're intentional.
Yeah. In 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what do you think makes a great coach?
Oh, geez.
That's 2. Oh, geez.
Not about you. So, like, to your point, Em, I think great coaches, it's not about me. I try not to be in the team pictures of the rugby teams I coached. If you look at team pictures, I'm not in it, because I'm not a player. I'm a coach, right? It's weird, like, we're both from different sports cultures, but it's like you and I actually have had this conversation where it's kind of weird in America because coaches are really idolized more than players often. Like, when a team wins the Super Bowl, like, the trophy goes to the owner and then to the coach. Well, I'm like, that's just weird to me. Like the coach wasn't on the field playing, why would they get that? And so, to me, great coaches always make it about others, and it's never about them. So I think not about you is how I would categorize that.
Which sort of leads beautifully into a conversation about culture. I know that you love working and shifting cultures within business. What's one of the, say, 3 critical steps in when you know the culture is not good? How do you turn it around?
I think the number one step is you need commitment from leadership. Like I'm actually a little wary of like organizations that have the chief culture officer role, because I think that's the role of the CEO. Because the role modeling that happens at the leadership is one of the key inputs to how people will behave. So I think part of that is so part of it is leadership buy-in. The second thing is you want your organization to design your culture with you, right? So don't come in and be like, oh, Amazon does this, so we're going to do it, right? No, like your and the third thing is I think culture is contextual to your strategy. So your culture should be in service of what you're trying to do as an organization. It shouldn't sit separately. So if you're aligned, like if you understand what your strategy is, and so a lot of companies that we work with don't have clear strategies, and they'll say our culture's bad. Or not bad. Most people don't say our culture is bad, because most cultures aren't bad, right? Like it's people, but they'll say like our culture isn't high performing, or they'll say, our culture, isn't open, right? Like people aren't honest. Like there are things about it. And so my question is, well, how does honesty in your culture help you meet your strategic goals? And they can't articulate it. And I'm like, well, if you're a leader of an organization and you can't articulate the connection between culture and strategy, I'm pretty certain your frontline supervisors can't. And so to me, that's the contextual piece that I think is really important. So I think, making sure that leaders are bought in to role model it, whatever you want to do, really thinking about strategy and then co-designing that culture with your organization by giving them voice, I think is probably the 3 things.
Yeah, fantastic. I really love, especially that last piece. Not many people talk about that connection.
I'll just share a little bit with this. So, Coach M's trying to get a word in edgeways on the podcast, but we did, like, coming out of COVID, there was a global law firm that came to us and they said, wow, we've saved tens of millions of dollars by being virtual. Could we be a virtual law firm? That was their question. And so we do a lot of this work because I have a scientific background, and so we like to go to the research. So we went and looked at the research. Law firms work on apprenticeships. There's actually a lot of research on apprenticeships. It's mostly like blacksmiths and things like that, but there's a lot of interesting research. But their question was, so how does the apprenticeship model work in a virtual environment? And then the second question was, how can we make our partners feel like they're part of something if they don't have an office to go to? And in that second thing, the research was actually pretty clear, which was interesting. So people feel like they're part of a community, which makes them sticky if there are 3 things. So one is if they feel like their individual purpose can be fulfilled, right? So if they're aligned to the purpose of the organization, that makes it sticky. The second thing is if they feel like their strengths are being leveraged. And the third thing, and we've used the term citizenship, whether they feel like they have a voice in the experience that they have. And so often we will talk to our organizations, they'll say, well, we want a leadership program. I'm like, do you need a leadership program for your culture? Or do you actually need a citizenship program? Like, what is it that you want the members of your organization, how can they be good citizens of your community? That's really what culture is. Culture is how everyone behaves. Like it's this implicit expectation that is placed on all the citizens of your organization. And so creating great citizens is the way that you create great cultures. And the way that you make people feel like citizens is you give them a say in the experience that they're having. And that's where that cultural piece comes from.
Yeah, you give them a voice. And I love describing culture, the way we do things around here, plus
Right.
your vision, mission, purpose, values, and coaching skills. Obviously, I have to throw that in there because this is a coaching podcast. And I do believe that is what makes great citizens,
Right,
and
exactly.
helps them want to connect to be a part of the vision, which is how you get retention, how talent thrives in the workplace. All right, let's land this episode talking about the work that you do helping leaders through transition. So I guess with that in mind, I'd love to know, what are some of the biggest mistakes leaders make when they transition into a new role? I mean, you mentioned earlier about the implicit approach
Mhm.
versus explicit approach. I'm just wondering, can you talk a little more about, not change management, but it is that
Yeah,
transition piece?
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, so we do lots of work. In fact, um I'm doing a little bit of work with a CFO actually in Sydney, who's coming to a new role. And so the way we think about it is that, like, you need a bit of a journey. So along with the implicit leadership nature, the other challenge that we have is that we leverage our expertise very poorly in different contexts. And what I mean by that is, I was the CFO over here at this company, and now I'm the CFO at this company. And this is actually a very interesting, this is like a coaching, sports coaching analogy. The things that I pay attention to in my old company are not the things that I necessarily need to pay attention to here. So as athletes, like, we teach them to look for cues, right? You're like, oh, you see this, that means this is going to happen. You see this, that means that's going to happen. The cues that we take from our old companies and bring to our new companies may not be correct. So one of the things that leaders do is they act too quickly because they feel like they need to demonstrate an impact. The other thing they do is they act too late. Like, they also have a window where they can drive change, which 6 months in is too late. So you don't want to act like in week one, because you have to understand the cues that you're looking for, but you can't wait 6 months. In 6 months, you're not new anymore. And so what we do is we think about 30 days listening, right? So get out there, talk to people, talk to your team, talk to the organization. Like, you often see this, Oscar Munoz did this when he first came into United Airlines. And I recently did a Q&A with Oscar, amazing speaker. And he talks about, like, he went out and he went to airports and he sat down and talked to people, right? Guys, so the 30 days listening so you can really understand. And then we say 30-day analyzing. And I encourage leaders to not do that on their own, but to with their key stakeholders, to test hypotheses, to be like, hey, I heard this, I think this is happening, what do you think? Right? To test those hypotheses. And then you get 30 days acting, right? So that's all within the first 3 months. The key thing that you need to do in conjunction with that is to, like, what we would say is build your authentic leadership model, but really understand what you're trying to accomplish. And in part of that analyzing and acting is your team. Leaders, especially when they come into new organizations, are reluctant to change too much of their team, because what they want to do is rely on the experience of their team within their organization. But I will tell you that the biggest, and this is especially true at the C-suite, like, it's the CEO. There was a CEO I worked with, I talked to him earlier this summer, and he's finally got his team in place that he really believes in. That's 2 years after he took the role. Right? Because it's hard. You can't come in and be like, well, this person's been in this role for 10 years, but I don't think they're the right person. And you don't trust your, like, intuition with that. And so you keep them. And then that actually means that, like, they're not working. Your relationship with them isn't working. That means the team isn't functioning. And so I would really suggest, like, when we work with people, we ask them to be really ruthless in who's on their team, because that's actually going to be the key to their success. So that's the way that we think about those transitions.
And could you share one last story? I've heard you talk about this and I love it, in relation to team not having the best players on the field, but you're still able to either sabotage your opponents, is the story. Hopefully your wheels are turning, which story I want you to share about rugby, because it really does bring, I think, everything we've spoken about home on this episode with that one story. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I'm not exactly, but I'm happy to share a lot. There's a phrase that came from a great rugby coach in America called Jack Clark. And so Jack has coached at Cal for a very long time, and it's by far the most successful rugby program in the US. And so when Jack's recruiting players to his team, what he says is, if I recruit the wrong member to the team, they beat me every day. And if I don't recruit them, they only beat me once a year. Right. And so that to me is like that's where team selection often when we come in. So first of all, I think it's really hard to create high performing business teams because we don't select them to be great teammates. You know, the trick is, if you get the right people on the team, you can outperform other teams, even if they're not as good players, right? Even if they're not the best. And I actually, like, we talked about difficult players. I like to differentiate difficult and disruptive. So difficult players I can deal with. That means just the way they communicate is like hard for you, or but disruptive you can't have on your team, because disruptive impacts others' performance. And so I think being really intentional to make sure that you are able to differentiate between those two, but making sure that you get the right players on your team is, I think, really, really critical, because team is a multiplier. It's a multiplier of potential. That wasn't the story you were asking me for,
No,
so I don't know
well,
if
it
you
summarized the story. It was about a team you were coaching, and basically they were, you know, you got to the final. They weren't as good as the other players, but you were able to come together in that moment, sabotage their game, bring their level down. You still lost, but it was
Yeah. I
you
mean,
got within a couple of points.
I now know the story you're talking about. So this is the Penn State women's team. So in 2004, we won the national championship. It was our third national championship. We were going back to the final in 2005, and we played Stanford. And we were defending national champions, and Stanford beat us by 40 points. So for the American listeners, rugby is the ancestor of football. The reason it's called a touchdown is because in rugby, you have to touch the ball down. You might have always wondered that. Now you're more interesting in cocktail parties because you have this trivia. So they beat us by more than 40 points. That's a blowout, right? And but we were the defending national champions, so we were just shocked. So what we did is we came back, and we actually said, all right, well, they're much better than us. What do we do? And we looked at absolutely everything that we looked at: how we recruited, how we trained, our physical performance, our culture, our leadership team, how we run practice. We looked at everything, and we said, we have to, this is the only way that we can do it. And so we go back to the playoffs in 2006. We're scraping through. I think we just about beat Air Force in the quarterfinals, and Stanford is beating everyone by 60 points, everyone. And so we scrape into the final, and we're playing Stanford again. And it's an 80-minute game in rugby. There's 5 minutes left, and we're winning. Something like 10-12, really close game. We're winning. They have a woman on their team called Jess Watkins. Jess played rugby for the US, was an amazing rugby player, better than anyone that we had, but we had been able to hold her down. She had not broken free. She was just super fast. By the way, rugby wasn't the most impressive thing that Jess Watkins ever did. She became an astronaut. The second astronaut that played rugby for America, just so you know. So little girls out there, you want to be an astronaut, maybe playing rugby might be that pathway to it. But anyway, with 5 minutes to go, Jess gets the ball. We've held her down. We're tired. She scores. They win. We lose. Team's devastated for about 30 minutes. And then they were like, wow. No one else thought we could even be close to these guys. Our performance, that was as good as that team could. That was one of the best teams I have ever coached. And so sometimes our metrics are wrong. Winning team, good team, losing team, bad team. That team lost, but was amazing, and actually set a platform. The following year we came back, so we reviewed everything again. The following year we came back, we beat Stanford in a close game. But now we had a system. So we reviewed everything that we did. We adjust the year after that. We lost to Stanford in a close game. But then we went on a run, and we won 8 of the next 10 national championships. And or 7 of the next 9 or something like that. All because of that team that lost and the reaction to their loss. I think they actually call it anti-fragile now, the phrase is, which is you take pressure and you don't resist it. The goal is not to be a resilient team. which is to be able to resist stress and remain the same. The goal is to be an anti-fragile team, which is take that stress and use it for improvement and growth. And so I didn't know that phrase back then, but that team was anti-fragile and kicked off and had a legacy of players that played 10 years after them that won a national championship, but it was their culture and their commitment to excellence and continuous improvement that lasted throughout that program. So I think that might have been the story you were waiting for.
Oh, and I'm glad you shared it. It's a beauty, and so many take-home messages in relation to landing this episode, because remember, coaches, it's not about us. Make sure that we're explicit with our authentic leadership model. And I think it is important that we look at what does the best of the best do and say to ourselves as coaches, how do we get 1% better? Think about it again.
Exactly.
One thing that Pete has said that's triggered you to take action, whether it be journaling, whether it be really looking at where your mindset is, because that becomes the strength of the coach that you are today. So, Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so happy you're in Colorado and we get to hang out because you are inspiration and you are a thought leader. So thank you for being on the Coaching Podcast.
No, Coach M, the discussions, our relationship has been brief, but our discussions have been very stimulating. So I appreciate our relationship very much.
And thanks everyone for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.